The second segment of the show, the final segment of the show for today, we're talking to a United States colored trooper with the 13th Regiment, who's given us some information in reference to the election of President Abraham Lincoln and how he reacted to that election. Let's pick up at that, Trooper Radcliffe.
Yes, sir. Well, as I was saying, Mr. Lincoln saw that the key to keeping the nation together was to put down this rebellion, as it were. So the next day, I remember he called for 75,000 volunteers. And through the grapevine, we heard that colored men in Michigan, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Ohio, New Hampshire, they commenced to drilling, training themselves, organizing themselves to fight for the old flag. Then they were told to go home. They wouldn't be needed. This was white man's war. If we got to do anything at all, it involved a pick and a shovel. But that being said, we still, amongst ourselves, mobilized. Mr. Frederick Douglass said it. How you gonna win the war with your white hand without your strong black hand? And he told that to Mr. Lincoln. Well, Mr. Lincoln was a politician, and he was afraid of making certain people angry to leave the Union to go to the Confederacy. So being a politician, he straddled that fine line. You know, being a Canadian citizen now, I'm looking at this like, I am so glad I'm not down there, because I know what's happening. I didn't have an attack of selfishness, but I sat with my daddy one night on his porch, and we were drinking iced tea and talking about the situation. And he brought to my attention, he said, Lord, I'm thinking very much about our relatives, our kinfolk and relations. They're in Virginia, the ones in South Carolina, your grandparents we left in Tennessee, your great aunts, you know, I don't know what's gonna happen to them. And I studied on that for a minute, and I remembered how my grandparents played with me while they were in the fields. I remember how my great aunt used to drag me around with her when she was doing the Mrs. Wash. I go in the big house and sit with her, and she sang Negro spirituals. And I went home and I sat and I looked at my wife. She didn't know I was looking at her, how beautiful she was. And my 3 beautiful children, my 2 sons and my daughter. And I said, Lord, I've got it made. We made it, you brought us out. And then I had to ask myself, am I gonna be selfish enough to stay here with all what you gave me and forget about where I come from? It didn't take long. I went outside and I stood looking out over the river and the canal, and I watched the little boats going down through there, and out of nowhere, one streak of lightning came from the water, went up. I took that to mean from south to north. That streak of lightning was all I saw. And then I knew what I had to do. I talked to my wife. I had to talk to my children. I told them I got to leave them for a little while. I got to go see about Grandma and Papa. I'll be gone for a minute, but I'll be back. So myself, 7 of my friends, all good, strong black men, they left the businesses and their families. We jumped on a train from St. Catharines, went back south, crossed back into the United States. We met a man named William Steele, prominent black man, Philadelphia. He gathered up about 25 of us, and we went to a place called Reedville, Massachusetts. I enlisted. This was right after Mr. Lincoln had signed Emancipation. He didn't free all the slaves, just the ones in the states that were fighting. He had to watch Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Tennessee had went to the Confederacy, so he had to hold those three, Kentucky, Delaware, and Maryland, because they surrounded Washington, D.C. So he was needing people. They had lost the Battle of Bull Run. They got the clocks clean in a place called Antietam, Maryland. They could have won, the war would have been over, but they had bad generals, so they lost. Black men had already been in combat out in Kansas, an outfit called the 1st Kansas Colored Volunteers. They were fighting the Confederates in 1861. We heard about them. We joined a unit, the first one raised in the North, put together by Frederick Douglass, Governor John Andrew, 54th Massachusetts Volunteers. We weren't relegated to shovels and picks like they wanted. We went down to South Carolina, went to a place called James Island, had my first stand-up battle there. I was lucky. I thought I'd had it. I had bullet holes in my pants and my coat and my hat. I got through it. We marched, went over to a place called Morris Island, and they told us, we're going to attack yonder, this fort, a battery, they called it, Wagner. We prayed. Some of us cried. A lot of us took pieces of paper. My best friend from back home in St. Catherine's, I wondered what he was doing. He was sewing a piece of paper inside his coat. Had his name on it. I didn't know any better, and I said, Frank, what are you doing? He said, tomorrow, if I fall, I want somebody to know who I am. And I looked at him, and it came over me. We were going into the attack first. We all might not make it out of here. Long story short, for those that thought the colored man wouldn't fight, we showed them. With that said, there were nearly 200,000 of us went into the military. I was wounded later in Florida, a place called Olusty. I went back home to Canada to heal. 54th was back in South Carolina. This unit in Nashville, close to my home, was forming. They were taking former slaves, free men of color, the 13th United States Colored Troops. So I joined that. I went in with a rank of sergeant by me having prior battle experience. We guarded the railroad lines from Johnsonville to Tennessee all the way to Nashville. We fought the Confederates along the railroad lines, the Confederate cavalry. We beat Bedford Forrest a few times too. And we had reason to go after him, but we went after him. When Nashville came, December 15th and 16th, 2 brigades of colored troops took part in that battle. The 13th went in on the December 16th, 1864. I was wounded again, but our regiment was the only one that got to the top of the Confederates' position, and we ran them off. We lost approximately 60% of our men, officers included. When General Thomas, the federal commander, rode over the field after it was over, he said that he didn't want to hear anybody else say that the black man wouldn't fight. We even got congratulations from a rebel general. So after that, I was promoted to lieutenant, mainly because we were running out of men.
Okay, very good. And of course, we're running out of time here, Trooper. And I just want to thank you for remembering that information for us as a people and, of course, as a country, to know that in a real sense you are an example of what it took in order to really emancipate Africans. President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yes, sir.
But it was the Battle of Nashville and those battles that you and others participated in that really emancipated all of us.
Thank you,
I want to thank you for that. And I also want to encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.